Now, I know there have been some conflicting views held by some of you regarding the need for complete security in this matter. More specifically, your opposition to the cover story, created to give the impression there's an epidemic at the base. I understand that beyond it being a matter of principle, many of you are troubled by the concern and anxiety this story of an epidemic might cause to your relatives and friends on Earth. Well, I completely sympathize with your negative views. I found this cover story personally embarrassing myself. However, I accept the need for absolute secrecy in this.
It feels like I cannot stay away from content like this.
I'm going to talk today about energy and climate. And that might seem a bit surprising because my full-time work at the Foundation is mostly about vaccines and seeds, about the things that we need to invent and deliver to help the poorest 2 billion live better lives.
A man's heart is now full of darkness.
Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Got a special thrill here today. I've managed to secure a really important interview with an important philanthropist that has spent billions producing drugs to save the earth. Not kill it, but save it. That man is called Master William Bates. Master William Bates, how are you doing, mate?
In 21st century, people sit on TV stations and say things like this.
Si je peux être, est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas faire cette étude en Afrique où il n'y a pas de masque, pas de traitement, pas de réanimation, un peu comme c'est fait d'ailleurs.
A man's heart is now full of darkness.
We need to invent and deliver to help the poorest 2 billion live better lives. I asked the top scientists on this several times, do we really have to get down to near zero? Can't we just, cut it in half or a quarter? And the answer is that until we get near to zero, the temperature will continue to rise. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, a little bit of multiplication. We clearly need a vaccine that works in the upper age range because they're most at risk of that.
A man's heart is now full of darkness.
And doing that so that you amp it up so it works in older people and yet you don't have side effects. We need to invent and deliver to help the poorest 2 billion live better lives.
In this post on Twitter, and I couldn't keep it to myself. First of all, they were speaking French, so I had to do research and go find out what exactly are they saying. And when I found out, I became so sad.
What does it feel like to have all this money and use it in a way where people actually think that you're depopulating the earth? What does it feel like knowing that you go to African nations and most of them want to run away from you when you talk about giving them vaccinations? Master Bates, did you know about this oncoming pandemic in advance?
A man's heart is now full of darkness.
Was this a coincidence that you actually had a drill on a pandemic that mirrored the pandemic that hit the globe? Or is that a coincidence, Master Bates?
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
If we have, 1 in 10,000
side effects, that's, way more, 700,000, people who will suffer from that. So
Thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero.
really understanding the safety at gigantic scale across all age ranges, pregnant, male, female,
A little bit of multiplication.
undernourished,
Provocateur, est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas faire cette étude en Afrique où il n'y a pas de masque, pas de traitement, pas de réanimation, un peu comme c'est fait d'ailleurs pour certaines études dans le sida, où chez les prostituées, on essaye des choses parce qu'on sait elles sont hautement exposées et elles se protègent pas. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
A man's heart is now full of darkness.
existing comorbidities. It's very, very hard. And that actual decision of, okay, let's go and give this vaccine to the entire world.
Thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero.
Governments will have to be involved because there will be some risk and indemnification needed.
A little bit of multiplication.
Before that can be decided on.
And see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look.
Willa, if your mother ended up dying through having a dodgy vaccine administered into her body, what would you say about that?
The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
A man's heart is now full of darkness.
Willa, how many deaths would it take before it becomes a tragedy? Willa, do you and all your family have exactly the same vaccine that you expect the global population to administer? Or is yours somehow a little bit cleaner? Looks like I'm not getting too much from Master Bates. It's understandable. If I'd been caught out, I'd be probably saying very little right now. Just saying my mother used to always say to me, if you can't say nothing nice, don't say fuck all. Red Pill Phil, I love you all, even Master Bates.
Provocateur, est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas faire cette étude en Afrique où il n'y a pas de masque, pas de traitement, pas de réanimation, un peu comme c'est fait d'ailleurs pour certaines études dans le sida, où chez les prostituées, on essaye des choses parce qu'on sait elles sont hautement exposées et elles ne se protègent pas. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Now, I'm sure you're all aware of the extremely grave potential for cultural shock and social disorientation contained in this present situation, if the facts were prematurely and suddenly made public without adequate preparation and conditioning.